Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and today I'm here with Lucy Hay. Hi Lucy!
Hi Joanna, thanks for having me.
Oh no, it's great to have you on the show. So just a little introduction. Lucy is a novelist, script editor, screenwriter and blogger at bang2write.com. She's one of the organisers of London Screenwriters Festival and she has books on writing thriller and drama screenplays. So Lucy, your site's awesome as I was just saying, but I wonder if you could start by telling us a bit more about you and your writing background.
Wow, my writing background. Wow, where do you want me to start? I mean, basically, I've always wanted to be a writer. I think a lot of writers say that, but certainly in my case, it's true. I remember being about 8 and seeing like the novels on my mother's bookcase and thinking, "Wow, I'd really like my name to be on there." And as I got older, I really got into movies as well, and I think I wanted to be a film director at one point. I remember being given a director's chair for my 13th birthday, and I really loved Alien, and even though they were too old for me really, I was watching them all the time and just thinking it would just be really cool to get involved in just storytelling in general really, and I went into screenwriting kind of by accident. I ended up going on the screenwriting for film and television course at Bournemouth University and just really falling into script editing from there really, because I found that although I love writing and I love writing novels, but in terms of writing screenplays, I did enjoy it, but not as much as like picking them apart for other people. I love that. I love the structure of screenplays. You know, they're so specific. Even when we change the structure of a script to something that's not, say, non-linear, it's still very specific. It's not so psychological as a novel, and I really liked that kind of physical world, that visual world, and I like to kind of approach that from the outside, if you like, as a script editor rather than a screenwriter.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting because there's so many things in there I want to ask you. But let's start by just what are the main differences, I guess, because most of my listeners are authors of books. What are the big differences between a book, writing a novel, and writing a screenplay?
Well, I think the key kind of similarity is that, you know, they're all stories. So in that regard, they're the same. I mean, very often when you go to writers' conferences, they'll say, oh, you know, screenwriters should write novels and novelists should write screenplays. And I totally agree with that, because if you can tell a story in one form, you can definitely tell it in another. But there are very certain specifics that you have to do in terms of, I mean, it's much more of a free-for-all. A novel. There are obviously things that you have to do in terms of telling the story and anchoring your reader and things like that, obviously. But in terms of screenwriting, I think a lot of people forget that it's a physical world, it's a visual world, and you have to render these psychological processes of the story, these intangible elements, as something that's an image. And so as a result, a lot of scripts that cross my desk are really just chains of dialogue, because that's all the writer can kind of get a handle on. They think, well, that's the kind of physical element of the screenplay, but that's more to do with theatre. Theatre is about characterisation, about dialogue, and obviously about structure as well, but it's not about imagery in the same way that screenplays are, and that's probably the biggest challenge that any screenwriter has, is actually creating an image. It is a lot harder than it looks.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll come back to treatments in a minute because I've been writing a treatment. But let's kind of take a step back. So what does the market look like right now? Because we've seen an explosion in possibilities for kind of, you know, movie, TV things. What is the current options for people with screen exploitation, I guess, of rights?
In terms of rights, then obviously the internet has opened everything up wide, and self-publishers and indie publishers in particular now have a lot more kind of options available to them in terms of actually pursuing their own projects and getting their own stuff made and adapted from their original source material into web series, television projects, various different, short films, feature films, things like that. And certainly there's lots of really great sites now that people don't even necessarily need an agent to help them negotiate that anymore, because there's a lot of information online. There's iprlicense.com as well, which is, I think, is associated with Legend Press. They do a great job of advising authors on the rights that they can sell to different marketplaces. And it's also worth remembering the different languages as well. Like one of my books sold in Germany, for instance. A friend of mine wrote a best-selling mystery novel that sold the television rights over in France, for instance. So it's not just English language or the language that you're writing in. It's many, many different ways of exploiting things. There's different, depending on your audience as well. There's things like merchandising rights as well, toys and things associated with that story world. Like Harry Potter had all the different kind of maps of the story world, and the Hobbit and all that kind of stuff. Graphic novels is a big thing of the moment as well. So really, the sky's the limit, and you don't necessarily need an agent, but you do have to have a strategy. You do have to decide, what you want to happen next for your intellectual property, and how to go out there and get it, because anything can happen, and you can if an audience wants it, you can get there.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I was just at the London Book Fair, and I went to a session with a load of producers, and this guy said, look, there just isn't enough content for us to put out there right now for us to buy. And I was really surprised, because I feel like, we all feel as authors that there's this kind of glut, and there's this tsunami of stuff. So obviously these producers and people like yourself don't go around reading all the books. So how do we get the attention of the right people?
Well, pitch level is the key, really, and getting out there and making sure that people know about your work and know about its possibilities and know about how it can work for them. I mean, I think one of the reasons that a lot of producers and agents and people at the selling level feel that there isn't enough content is that pitching, especially in the UK, is really bad. Yeah. You go to a lot of conferences and you hear, you ask writers what they're working on, and they give you this very long rambling kind of thing where you come away and you think, I didn't actually learn anything about that project at all. Writers need to understand that they're selling things at concept level, and that essentially, screenwriters get it a lot better than novelists a lot of the time, because they have to reduce everything to the logline, which is like, a little story sentence that kind of encapsulates what your project is. And I think it would really help a lot of novelists who want their work adapted to actually think of it in screenwriting terms, how to take it at logline level to treatment level to extended pitch level, take it into these virtual pitch fests or these conferences, book fairs and so on, and actually search out these producers themselves rather than hoping that they'll just randomly come to them.
And of course, many authors are introverts, and the kind of the worst thing possible is to go into a pitching session. And I've been to one, and it's actually quite terrifying.
It is.
And you realise how bad you are when you even if you practice. So what are some of your tips for one of those 3-minute pitch sessions?
Well, we run a pitch fest at London Screenwriters every year, and so I'll often write kind of pitch fest guides on the website at londonscreenwritersfestival.com. But I think I think really knowing your logline inside out is absolutely key. A good logline is usually in the region of 25 to 60 words, and having a good sense of tone, genre, the characters. I talk about the 3 C's of pitching, which is character, who your character is, what they want, the conflict, what they're up against, and then also clarity as well, because you've got to be clear and it's got to be straightforward, and you've got to be able to grab that person within. I mean, they say that you can tell a great pitch within the first 30 seconds, and certainly that's always been my experience. When someone sits in front of me at London Screenwriters or any other writer in any other kind of situation, I usually go, yeah, straight away, or no. It is as quick as that. And sometimes a pitch can be really excellent. It's just not of any interest to me. If somebody's going to sit opposite me and say it's a zombie screenplay, I'm immediately going to go no. It doesn't matter how good it is. I'm not interested in zombies. So doing research of who you're pitching to is another key element. I mean, someone came to me the other day and said, I've got a screenplay, it's female protagonist, obviously, I'm interested in that, and she's powerful, she's sexy, she gets her kit off. I know you like all of that, he says. And I said, yeah, I do. I do like all of that stuff. I like sexy thrillers. I like the solving of mysteries. I like female protagonists. So immediately he's kind of setting the scene, making me interested in what he's got. So that can help as well. So that plus, knowing who you're pitching to, doing your research, setting the scene, having your 3 C's, your characters, your conflict, your clarity, all of those are key in getting someone interested in your idea at pitch level.
And don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you actually give an example of a logline, like a good logline?
Oh, goodness. I mean, most of the loglines that I read have got like NDAs attached, which means non-disclosure agreements, so I'm not supposed to talk about them. But I mean, if you actually Google loglines, you'll find the loglines for many different movies that were already made, for example. I mean, one that I use frequently in classes is probably for Alien, which would be, everybody knows in space no one can hear you scream. But that's actually the tagline. That's to do with the PR campaign. That's not actually anything to do with the logline, and that's something that writers mistake all the time, and loglines are not taglines. So if the tagline of Alien is "in space no one can hear you scream," then the logline is 7 space truckers pick up a hostile alien life form, which picks them off one by one.
So it's more of a description of the overall description of the whole book, which is
essentially
really hard. It's really hard.
It's very, very hard.
Yeah, and it's so interesting learning about this stuff, because part of me thinks, well, you should start with the logline. Like, you should try, before you write a novel, you should write the logline. And because when you try and do it the other way, it's really much more difficult.
Yes, I think. I actually do start my own novels with a logline. I always try and write it that way, and certainly I think screenwriting can help novelists a lot. So I always actually would recommend any novelist do even just a short screenwriting course, a crash course if you like, or read a book, or a way of actually kind of working their way through their novel as they would through a screenplay. I think can pay dividends, definitely.
Yeah, I've got a whole stack on my desk at the moment of screenplays. I've got Terminator 2 and Thelma and Louise on my desk.
It's a great one.
But that's interesting. So we've talked a bit there about the logline. The treatment. Can you explain kind of what a treatment is? Because it's definitely something that most authors won't have come across before.
Well, I mean, a treatment is kind of like an outline, really. A treatment, it does depend who you're speaking to. Traditionally, a treatment is a selling document, and basically it's a blow-by-blow account of the plot. and how it works out in the screenplay. Ideally, it should be between, I mean, we talk a lot these days about sizzlers, which are like 3-page treatments. And they're supposed to sizzle, as their name suggests, and they're supposed to be really, really interesting and tell the story blow by blow, and actually draw you into that world. It's something that agents can read, that producers can read, that investors can read, without necessarily having to read the entire screenplay. So it's kind of like a diluted version, but a lot of people think it's then they've got to write it, very boringly, but you can't. You've got to write it in a really interesting way that really grabs people, that makes, like, investors in particular want to part with their money. So 3-4 pages is about, I mean, you used to get away with like 10, 12, 15 pages, but these days it's 3 or 4. It's always changing all the time.
Oh dear, mine's 7, so I might have to revisit that. But it's so fascinating. And what's interesting as well, you talk about that's a selling document, and the word investor, which is something you don't really hear in the sort of literary world so much. But this is what I also like about screenwriting, because it is about getting the work made, isn't it? It's about getting people to fund it. But what is the reality of, okay, say that people are really happy and they buy it and whatever. Can you sort of explain the reality of how many of these get optioned and how many of these get made, and how it kind of works?
Well, I mean, how long is a piece of string, I mean, if you get your screenplay optioned at all, then that's pretty cool, because probably, I wouldn't even say 10% of scripts get optioned or made at all. It's really, really hard. And certainly people will actually promise you money, and then money will disappear. And, there's lots and lots of false starts when it comes to movies. I think I was talking in my book about drama screenplays about how Dallas Buyers Club was the most stalled screenplay in Hollywood for 22 years.
Oh.
And the producer Cassian Ewells lost the money 3, 4, 5 times. He actually ended up having to basically strong arm money out of somebody whose job he'd given like 10 years before. The guy didn't even want to make Dallas Buyers Club. He was like, just give me some money, any money, I don't care. And he was like, oh, all right then. Which just seems crazy, I mean, they're very much triumph of hope over experienced movies. Very often what will happen is, if you want to make, a lot of writer-directors will just make their own film. So they'll bypass all of the option process and getting other people interested. They'll set themselves up, they'll attach a producer, they'll go after money, often with private investors or with BFI or screen agencies. Very often people will only offer up half the money. And there's lots of really complicated laws where somebody can't just give you a stack of money to make a film, because of tax and things like that. It's really complicated. So they'll say, we'll give you half, so you've got to match it from another source, or you've got to get from other places. You've got to get a certain amount of stuff that's in kind as well, like free people working on it, or free equipment, and it's balancing all these crazy things all the time. There's also private investment companies whose job it is just to fund movies, and they're like tax losses for other companies. And then there's banks who offer loans to make films that are kind of like mortgages basically, but then the bank owns the film, but once you've paid them back, then the film is yours, but it has to get into a certain amount of profit. And oh god, the comp is so complicated, it's crazy. And then there's all the different options as well at the base level. A lot of writers, especially first time writers, will find themselves signing free options to a producer. So a producer will come along and say, I want exclusive rights to this screenplay for a certain amount of time, and I will try and raise the money to make it, but I don't have any money up front, so your payment will come when I've raised the money. Those can be great deals or they can be terrible deals. It does depend. Certainly I've signed on projects that are free options that have worked out brilliantly, and that has catapulted people into situations where they could command a lot of money later, or on projects later in their careers as well. But if a writer is signing a free option, I always say to them, you've got to work out how good that option is for you. Never let a producer have your script for like 5 years for free. 6 months to a year, I think, is enough time. Maybe 18 months at a push, but certainly no more than that. And also, do they have a good track record for raising money? How many films have they made before? How well did they do? Is this their first film? Just because it's their first film doesn't mean that they're not good. So find out from their peers if they're any good. There are some sharks around, definitely, but most producers just want what you want, which is to make a film. And to get out there and it be really successful and make lots of money, or hopefully get some kudos with awards or whatever their strategy is. I find usually it's either money or awards. It's rarely both.
Same with books.
Yeah. So, it depends what type of story this is. Sometimes people are going for the kudos. They want the awards. They want Oscars, BAFTAs, all that kind of stuff. Or they want to do something that has, like, issues attached that's really big and important, and it has a big message to it, that it might be for that reason. Other times, they want to get in the DVD chart, they want to be able to sell lots of units, and I don't think either side is worse than the other. I think I actually like to work on projects that do both. I've been involved in projects that are award winners, and I've been involved in projects that have made a lot of money, and both have their own challenges, and both are equally interesting.
And just just to recap there, people, often people will get an option. Among the author community, people will say, "Oh, I've got an option," but actually that means pretty much nothing. It could be a free option. They could get no money. It might never get made. It's not that big a deal to get option. But the follow-on question there: if you only write the book but you don't write the screenplay, does that affect how the money works out later? Because obviously someone will need to adapt that. And do you recommend that authors do at least the first draft of a screenplay because of the writing credit?
It can depend. Sometimes authors like to be really involved, and sometimes they don't. We all know about Gillian Flynn, for example, and she's done stupendously well, and her adaptation of Gone Girl was masterly and amazing, and everybody loved it, and it was a very, very good adaptation. And I don't know her, and I don't know anything about the background of that project, but I would imagine that she probably instructed her agent that she wanted to be into this adaptation from the start, and so I would imagine if David Fincher hadn't approached her, she would have probably packaged it up with a first draft and a treatment and a one-page pitch and a whole package to show that she could do it, and that she was a serious person who could do it, because it's all about, can you deliver in screenwriting. Screenwriting is when it comes to meetings, it's all about, can you deliver by a certain amount of time. So I would imagine she packaged it all up in advance. So if you're dead set on being involved in your own adaptation, I would say that was probably a good idea. That said, there are other ways of doing it. Certainly I've known writers in the past go to their agents in particular, especially if their agents represent screenwriters too, and say, I really want to do an adaptation of my book, and I want you to pair me with a screenwriter to write it with them, or to package it with them. Can you make that happen? And I've seen that happen lots of times. And at my agents at Blake Friedman, there was Trisha Walker's Benedict's brother. She wanted to adapt her own novel, and she did that. You know, she got her agent involved to actually get her a screenwriter to advise her on that process. I think she wrote the adaptation herself in the end, but she had like a screenwriter with more experience kind of advising her in the process as you go along. Other times it's more kind of equal, and it's two people together. A screenwriter and a novelist together, and it's all about proving that you can do it, that you can deliver.
And let's face it, the first time any of us do anything, it's never very good. And learning to write a screenplay is a different skill. So this is something I think about all the time. Like, part of me really wants to write a screenplay, and then the other part thinks, if I write another novel, I know I can make money on that. Whereas with a screenplay, there's no guarantee that you're going to make money, is there? There's no guarantee it will sell. And as you said, most of them don't, actually.
Nah.
Which is crazy. But so you have your book, Writing and Selling a Thriller Screenplay, and you also have the drama screenplay, has a great discussion of thriller as genre, and a lot of authors shy away from genre, but maybe you could explain why genre is so important with screenwriting.
When it comes, screenwriting, we talk about genre and then we talk about drama, basically. Genre is all about those kind of big stories, those high concept stories, whereas drama is pretty much the minutiae of life and everything else, you know, the biopics and the famous struggles of famous people and inspirational stories of against adversity, things like that. It's the little things about little people and the human emotions is drama. Genre then is those big things, and it's all about convention. Like every type of genre has its own kind of defining characteristics, because audiences need to know what they're signing up for. You know, when a big movie like Jurassic Park, for instance, it's, you know, that you don't get more genreified than that. It's, you know, it's a big, gigantic movie about dinosaurs running amok on an island, and you know, that's what people want. They go for the plots and they come away happy because of the characters, I think. So I think it's really important to be able to actually kind of sell up front what your story is about in genre. I mean, there's a reason that drama movies don't do as well as genre. I mean, so occasionally you get like breakout hit dramas, you know, get like The King's Speech, for example, did very well at the box office, but that's usually a bonus. It's not going to happen as standard. And the reason that people don't sign up in droves for dramas is because they don't always know what they're about. You know, you can actually look at the box and you go, oh, okay, I get it, it's a love story, or it's the story of a man who did whatever, but it's not got that kind of visceral pull. It's about curiosity, really, and you go to see these movies, like something like Blue Valentine, for instance, an extraordinarily devastating movie about a marriage breakdown. And it's really realistic, and it's brilliantly done, and it's beautiful and devastating and completely and utterly depressing. You know, who wants to see that at the end of a week? You know, I was watching it. It was really cathartic. It was wonderful. It was beautifully acted, beautifully written, beautifully directed, and I was crying buckets, but you have to be in the mood for that, you know, whereas I would love to go and see Jurassic Park whenever, you know, who doesn't want to see people being eaten by dinosaurs? I love dinosaurs, and I love high-octane chases, and yeah, there's some quite deep philosophical stuff in Jurassic Park. They talk about the rape of the natural world, they talk about discovery, they talk about power and the illusion of control, you know, quite deep stuff, but ultimately it's about dinosaurs eating people. That's what it's about. And people, who doesn't want to see dinosaurs eating people? Who wants to see a marriage breakdown? You know, your marriage might be breaking down right this moment. You don't want to see a movie about it as well, you know. But you might want to see might want to see a dinosaur eating someone who looks like your ex-husband. You know, maybe.
And this is actually really funny because, and I said to you before that your website is really good for that kind of lightheartedness around stuff, because I feel like we all get so serious all the time, and like everyone's like, we have to write something really serious and prize winningy, but is it realistically, people, we're writing entertainment? Is that what it comes down to?
Absolutely. Entertainment is absolutely key, and the entertainment aspect of the spec pile in general is extremely low. Really, really low. Most of the time I'm reading stuff that is far too serious for its own good, and even stuff about dinosaurs eating people will be really, really serious. And it's, we want to be entertained. We don't want to be educated necessarily. We don't want to be shocked necessarily. We don't want to be inspired. We just want to be entertained. We want a good story well told. That's all we want. And obviously that means different things to different people, and it means different things in different story contexts. But at the end of the day, whatever you do within that context, you have to do it well, and you have to do it in an entertaining way. The reason that so many big directors in particular are so popular, the Michael Bays, the Steven Spielbergs, Christopher Nolans, doesn't matter what you think of them, they are masters of entertainment. They know who their target audience is. They know how to entertain them and they do it well, regardless of whether we personally like it or not. So that's what we have to do. We have to find out who our audience is, who we want to speak to, and we have to know what we want to speak about. And we have to do it in such a way that we can entertain our target audience. And I think the average screenwriter who's yet to break through hasn't really grasped that and doesn't know what they want to talk about, who they want to talk to. They don't know who their audience is, and as a result, if you don't know who your audience is, then you can't entertain them.
So do you recommend that authors really sort of watch the movies that they want to write something similar to and kind of break them down and work out why they're so popular?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, very often somebody will come to me and say, I really want to write a supernatural thriller or a supernatural horror, but I haven't watched any because I don't want to be influenced. It's like, seriously? It's like, you can't break new ground without knowing what's gone before. You have to steep yourself in whatever genre you want to write in, or whatever type of story. If you want to write a drama, you have to watch loads of dramas. You have to identify the movies that you like and the stories that you like, and take from that the best bits and actually put your own new slant on them. And you can't do that if you don't know what's gone before. And yet people will absolutely insist that they can't, because then they'll just end up copying. And yet the irony is they actually end up copying because they've just kind of absorbed stuff kind of in their peripheral vision that they then just churn out, and it's just stock characters, stock situations, and it's just like cliche after cliche, and it's just so boring.
So, what's your favourite? So I write thrillers. What would be your top film that you're like, go watch this, read the screenplay?
Oh God, there's so many. It depends on the day. I mean, I love Thelma and Louise. I remember watching that as a girl and just being, wow, it's amazing. Love Alien. Alien's a great film. I never get bored of watching Alien. I saw the 35th anniversary screening in London last year, and that was a massive thrill because I got to see it on the big screen for the first time. The work of Ridley Scott in sort of like the 80s and the early 90s was just exceptional. It was really good. Stuff like Legend and other things like The Abyss. James Cameron's The Abyss. I love that. It's one of his forgotten films. Now Avatar and T2 have eclipsed it, but I thought The Abyss was just so special and wonderful, and had a real human element to the storytelling that maybe wasn't in other pieces of his, for me anyway. I really loved the work of Oren Peli, the guy who did Paranormal Activity. I love the stuff that's coming out of his studio, things like Sinister, Insidious, stories about parenthood and negotiating parenthood and keeping your children safe and maybe failing them, because obviously that's a big concern for parents, and he's really got into that kind of psyche, that element of supernatural horror really, really well with Mr. Boogie and Sinister in particular. He was great, loved that character. And the whole kind of astral travelling thing with Insidious, I loved. I thought the first Saw was really awesome. I thought that changed the kind of the horror genre. Not necessarily for the better in the long term, because it turned really nasty for a long time with the torture porn kind of subgenre. But that first Saw was really exciting. This thought that you could take 50 grand or whatever it was and just turn it into this massive franchise. Amazing. That's everybody's dream, to take a tiny little indie film and turn it into this massive 7-picture franchise that everyone was obsessed with for so long. And there's just so many great things, and also rom-coms I think are really cool at the moment. And they went through a stage where they were a bit too blokey for my tastes, the Seth Rogen kind of stuff, and now we're into stuff where maybe the men are more naked than the women, which is nice, and things like Friends with Benefits, Justin Timberlake, loved that. I loved that one with Steve Carell and Julianne Moore, Crazy Stupid Love, loved that. There's some really, really good human stories there about love that are real. And seem relevant, that aren't just all fairy tales all the time. Stuff like 500 Days of Summer was a great film, really relevant to me. Really, it was an anti-rom-com, if you like, and I thought it was really cool.
Oh, great! Well, and you've given such a gamut there of things that you like, which is brilliant. And people should kind of be dipping into everything, right, in order to find things. But I also love your enthusiasm. So tell people a bit more about what they can find at your website.
Well, my website is about demystifying the kind of screenwriting process and the writing process in general. I don't write predominantly about novel writing so much as just creative writing, although I do write the odd posts about novel writing from time to time, especially about description, because when I do read novels for people, I find the description is usually the thing that needs the most work. And also structure as well, because that's my thing. I find a lot of indie authors in particular write great characters, but maybe their structure is all over the place. So I often advise about those two things. So I'll write about those in terms of novel writing, but also I'll write about writing careers and strategies and submission processes in general, because I'm very often the person on the other side of the submission process, either for screenwriting competitions or when people submit various pieces for my consideration. And some of the processes that people go through are very strange indeed. So I think it's so I write a column for Script Mag called Submissions Insanity, and so I'll write about that on Bang to Write as well, about how not to submit to people, especially agents, because I'll often be talking to agents about the crazy submissions that they get, because I get the same at competitions and various initiatives, especially at London Screenwriters. So and I'll write about just the notion of being a writer as well, because it's hard, it's very solitary writing, and you have to kind of be, if you want other people's validation, you're not going to get it. So you have to remember that you have to be your own biggest fan. And I find that a lot of female writers will often come to me in kind of almost like a counselling kind of capacity. It's like, you can do this, you can get out to the other side. And also there's free writing resources as well. There's downloads that people can access, and I've made lists of various podcasts I've been in, like this one, and videos. There's some video there from London Screenwriters, things like that people can access for free, and e-libraries, and my Pinterest as well, because I've got very specific kind of interests in story about representations of masculinity in film, representations of women in film. things like that, and crazy stories, because truth is stranger than fiction. So I love to actually kind of collect mad items of news as well, things like that, so which all can be accessed at Bang to Write.
It is a brilliant resource. So just give people the website address again, and also your Twitter handle.
Okay, it's Bang to Write, which is BANG, the number 2, WRITE, and that's bangtowrite.com, and then I'm Bang to Write on Twitter as well.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks so much for your time, Lucy. That was great.